of like, well, I know that from my work in palliative, you do enter those realms of mystery where we do, and we don't really fully understand or ever be able to put into words. Like it goes beyond and into that realm of mystery where, it's just like death. It's a realm of mystery.
Yes, death and birth.
Yeah,
absolutely,
exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so it kind of moves over into that area.
Yes, it's very profound territory.
Yeah,
and I think that's one of the reasons that I like the little Kabir, who was a guide to Asclepius, the great god of healing. This little Asclepius, this little Telesphorus was his name. He was a guide to Asclepius, and he was a tiny little chap, like a little gnome in a way, and he would write out the prescriptions for the god of healing. And I find it very touching that Jung's last sculpting before he died was a sculpting of this little chap who is thought of walking on the seashore, discovering things. And I like the whole feeling experience of this, that we're just taking little small steps, looking at this and looking at that. And in these very present realities are intimations of profound mystery that can't be reduced to surface chatter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, do you find people that begin the journey of working with the art of geometry? First, I'm just going to ask you about the words to use. Okay, sacred geometry, geometry of life, the art of geometry. There are all these different words. Is there a time and a reason to use each?
Well, yes. I think it's the processes we talk about can't be just put into neat definitions. So anytime I try and say anything about anything really, the words are always slightly a bit different because I'm in a next conversation. I'm in the next paragraph, so to speak, and things move and shift. So geometry really has to do with measuring the earth, but that isn't just with a tape measure. It's to take the measure of earth, if you like, to understand and become involved with the measure of something, the measure of the form, the structure, the measure, the proportions. And, there are some things in this study that never change. That has been an absolute mind blower for me. Most of the geometers referred to, and mathematicians of primary number, will refer to these certain things as transcendental qualities. I try and stay away from that word because it conjures up too much for me. I just like the notion that no matter the size, for instance, that no matter the size of the circle, its circumference is always in a certain relationship to its diameter. That never changes. So for me, these are mysteries that are kind of everyday mysteries. And they're here, they're present, they're immanent, they're in our world. And I didn't know this. I've had to learn these things. I'm still learning these things.
Yeah. It's interesting. I'm thinking about, all of a sudden, I'm thinking about children in school learning geometry. And,
geometry,
yeah, and thinking back to my own experiences learning geometry, which would be in Canada, just regular general public school in Canada. And we had very little geometry, I remember. I remember being excited by by the actual tools, by the geometry kits. You know, these tools seem so, isn't it? Like the tools themselves seem so exotic. And actually, that reminds me. You said to me once, it's about picking up the. I can't remember your exact words, but it was something like it's about picking up the compass and knowing why you're picking up the compass and holding the compass not just for picking it up to do drawing, but to connect it to something larger than that.
Yes,
do you remember saying?
Yes, the old mystery teachings. Of course, you know, when Pythagoras started, they didn't have compasses. And, of course, it's possible to draw a circle with a piece of string. I have used when I've done huge drawings, which I don't do many, but if I have, I have made them with pieces of string. That's very common. This piece of string becomes the radius of the circle. But yes, the tools in themselves are actually sacred objects. We don't think of them perhaps like that anymore, but they are, and fascinating. And I remember doing geometry at school too. We had to do quite a lot. And what I loved about it, in retrospect, this is 40-something years later, maybe 50 years later. That's a long time, isn't it? Is that they are very obvious. They always seemed obvious. I didn't like learning the theorems that went with them. I never saw the point of learning the theorems, really. But there's something that's very naturally obvious about these forms, and they touch us.
Yeah, I guess that's a good way to put it, that excitement in just seeing the geometry kit. It was exciting. As a child, I remember being excited by looking at that kit. I'm also having a little giggle here because as we were working with some of your writing, when you do workshops, you ask people to bring their tools, and you specify there that the straight edge is to have no nicks in it. And myself and my wise web woman had a little giggle over this because, it just it was a way of that you really it showed how important the tools were in such a common way. Like it would be like a teacher saying, that there should be no nicks in your ruler, but yet it really behind that is, let's respect these tools. Let's bring tools that that won't interfere with what we're doing.
Exactly. That's certainly one aspect of it. And I remember one person who took my workshop, he said, "Oh, why don't you just call it ruler? Why don't you just call it ruler?" I said, "Because it doesn't need to be a ruler. It needs to be a straight edge that has no nicks in it."
Oh,
it can be a broom handle, you see.
Oh, I see.
Yes.
Oh, that's very, I wouldn't have even thought of that.
Yeah.
Huh.